I think I notice a lot, right? So when I post these videos when
Yeah.
I'm shitting on modern architecture, I get a lot of loads of people are just in agreement, but then they will have a section of the comments that will always pin it as this narrative of reverting to traditionalism, and they will ascribe that to a right-wing ideology. They'll say that's like conservatism, it's nostalgia of the past, it's like denial of modernity, and then they'll turn that into other things, which means like anti-progressive ideas, etc. And the thing, I just kind of noticed that talking point a lot.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I want to hear your perspective on that.
oh yeah, absolutely. So I both love the talking point and I also hate it because I love it because it's so fun to kind of point out where it's kind of defective and it's not complete.
Yeah.
And but it's also annoying because it's just repeated over and over again. So I think people are uncomfortable with the fact that a new building looks like something they recognize from before as old. The point is, it's still a modern building. You can still integrate all the modern features of today, like floor heating, heat pumps, solar panels, in a building that looks nice, but is still modern.
Mm.
But still, that it looks like something that they recognize and not something completely new is kind of threatening to them because that feels like regression and not something progressive. But
Yeah.
my biggest problem with the whole idea of progressivism is that it's often not well defined and that it's also kind of empty. So they just like for a lot of people just being progressive is just, oh, we want things in a new way, we just want different things, we
Yeah.
want things to be just different, but just different doesn't mean better, you know. If you're just gonna change things just to change things, okay, I'm gonna put a lamp over here, oh no, I'm gonna put a lamp over here, you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where the lamp is on your desk. If it's like if it helps that it's in a certain location, then it might have a positive thing. But you can also throw it on the ground. Oh, that's also new, but now the lamp is broken, you know. And then with
That's
buildings, like you can
postmodernist.
build.
That's the
Yeah,
postmodernist. Just turn the light off and
exactly.
smash
The
it.
broken lamp.
Yeah. But
Look how brilliant.
what you were saying, so where I was sort of tying that back to when I was looking at this Communist Party thing, a lot of it
Yeah,
is rightfully, if you're the working class, you've come from two world wars where you were just put into the front line in a meat grinder and
yeah,
you were destroyed. And so a real hatred, understandably, came off the back of the this sort of industrial revolution where you see this world which is divided between largely industrialists, aristocrats, and then everyone else. And then so after World War II, the voice of everyone else became, there was this narrative flip, right? And this is what I was learning with the communist thing I was looking into, was that after World War II, previous to it, the working class were always talked down to. They were always like, you're lazy. There was mass unemployment through Great Depression and stuff, and it was like, they're lazy, they don't want to work, etc. Then they went to war, saved the nation, saved the whole of Western civilization. Now they're amazing. Now they're the salt of the earth. They're the best people ever. So at that point, I think you have this trend where this working class is now celebrated and empowered, and they are so traumatized by the horrors of before that they see the whole, and this is what I got from the communist thing, they see everything of the past as innately evil and innately bad. They can't see it as these parts of the past were awful and these parts were amazing. I think like what I hope people start to see is like you need to kind of be able to look at the past objectively, which is very hard to do because the story of how did they amass such wealth to make such beauty
yeah,
is a dirty one. Like that's an awful story. But it's like to look at, say, or listen to like Mozart, which I believe, I might be incorrect here, but I believe Mozart was like an aristocrat, and a lot of these, I might be wrong on that, so I'll just maybe fact check that. But like a lot of artists, poets, painters, architects would have been aristocracy. But that doesn't necessarily mean that their artistic expressions were wrong, but perhaps the way they got to it were wrong. And it's a very revisionist way of looking at the past to just say that anything that was a product of evil effectively is wrong. Because then by that same measure, you could look at progressivism as the same. It's a product of it. You wouldn't have had progressivism without World War II or, that sort of thing. So it's like everything comes from everything. You need to try and look at eras and take what's good and reject what's bad of it. That's kind of what I've been seeing,
Exactly. I think we need to just be a bit more nuanced than the previous generations who just said like old is bad. I mean, it's everything that's old really bad. I mean, some things that are old are good, you know. Maybe there's some things that are very valuable that are old, and yeah. So it's really easy to throw out the baby with the bathwater, and that's one of the biggest risks. And it's very. I mean, I think one of the most damaging things is that I don't know, like, is this dogma of the modernists who are actively using kind of the Second World War as a weapon to make everything that they don't like kind of suspect. So it's either it must be a bit Nazi, you know, it must be a little bit right wing, it must be because oh well the Nazis built in you know classical architecture. Well, the Soviets also did so,
Mm.
and also some of the Bauhaus students were actually the inventors of the existence minimum, or like the minimum thing you need to survive in a building, which was literally used for the concentration camps, but they forget that part of history. So you know. So it's kind of a selective, you know, like cherry picking history to make a case against something you don't like.
Yeah.
And then they were able to use that really well, but also just they were, you know, they had this whole, you know, like we're going towards a new future narrative. And that narrative they could use to say like, okay, this is modern, this is good, this is the new way, and everything else can be disregarded. And that narrative they're still using to this day. But nowadays, there's more and more data available. We have the internet, we have more research, and we see that they were wrong. And now, like, it's a very slow trickle of information to the general public that
Mm.
they were wrong and that there is more to it than only what they were saying. And their narrative doesn't work anymore. And that's where we come in. So, yeah.
What I've noticed with when I was saying about comments, there's some people that would say it, they would attach it to sort of conservative, etc.
Yeah.
What I've noticed in person is, say, of my group of friends. I know it's very like what's the word, just people I know, whatever that phrase is.
Yeah.
But I've noticed with my friends who have a range of different perspectives politically, I notice nearly everyone agrees. This is really like interesting to me. Nearly everyone agrees on architecture. They all say it's ugly. So what I've noticed,
Yeah.
I've never in my personal life and in when I speak to people, I've never seen this sort of like right and left perspective on it in reality. It might be from some highly theoretical people, maybe some architects, people that studied it, I don't know,
Yeah.
whatever. But I've noticed in reality, my most far left friend and my most like right wing, far right friend would both agree on bad architecture, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the funny thing. That's the actual reality. So the whole political argument is bollocks. It's
Yeah.
just, it's nonsense. Based on that. And so what I just was telling was kind of the whole deeper kind of, you know, logic behind it. But when it comes down to it, just absorb when you observe real people's standpoints, it's just it doesn't hold up. And that's the case with a lot of those ideas that they hold up. So like I think for me my kind of pet project is the whole progressivism thing, because I believe what if we redefine progressivism in a way that it leads to a better human condition, so
Hmm.
healthier people, more prosperous people, more happy people. If we measure success of buildings in those terms, then suddenly you get a very different type of architecture that starts to win and that looks far more traditional.
Yeah.
So is it then really, you know, still progressive to do like to repeat a trick that has been done for like 70 years now?
That's such a good point. Yeah, and like there was one thing when I made my Milton Keynes video that I did like with the way they designed Milton Keynes. There's a few things, there's a few very redeeming
Yeah,
factors about Milton Keynes, but there's one specific thing which I think encompasses progressive ideals, was the idea that they wanted people's access to space to be equal. So they wanted like green space specifically. So they wanted people of whatever background to all have a decent sized home within a short walk from a park,
Yeah.
and to have good amenities around them. So that's a great
Amen.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like
Yeah.
that's a fantastic idea that you can still do. So if you rebuilt in a traditional style, you can take that fantastic modern idea and implement it
Yeah.
into older cities.
It's and the point is that idea has nothing to do with modern architecture. It's just like having to do with equal, kind of equal amenities for as many people as possible. Of course, it will never be fully possible to give everybody like exactly the same home, because otherwise you get kind of a new type of communism,
Yeah.
like
And it shouldn't. It
everything the
shouldn't.
same.
Like that's the thing in
No,
Milton
but
Keynes, you have wealthy areas and you have like shitter areas. Some of the shitter areas have got
yeah,
very shit, but I'll be honest, the level of how shit they are compared to say in London, the difference is Milton Keynes is much better, even on like the lower areas. So the idea is like we just don't need to have this divide where poor people are in slums and rich people in fucking stately manor homes. You can have rich people in really beautiful places, stately manor homes, whatever, as long as the poor people aren't living in shitty conditions. And so I think that
yeah,
was Milton Keynes' attitude, was like, well, let's at least make it so the social housing, the lower end of the spectrum, they at least have
yeah.
decent amenities.
Yeah, yeah, but isn't that like for most of the modern projects, that's kind of the same? Also in Holland, you have a lot of actually really pleasant places where people really happily live. For example, in the 80s, or actually in the 70s, 80s, they built a lot of those kind of, we call them cauliflower neighborhoods. A very strange fact, but they're very organic. So you have like one entrance road, and then like the road breaks up in all these little smaller parts, and you go into, it's almost like a lung. So it
Is
kind
that
of
Garden Cities? Is it linked with Garden
it's kind
Cities?
of, it's based on garden cities. It's also based on another concept. I forgot the name for a moment, but
Mm.
so they're very green. Everybody has like a little garden. There's lots of parks, and I loved it as a kid because I could always kind of find these weird places where I could build huts, or could like play hide and seek and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
But the buildings are so generic that literally you could be put in one of those places and you could not tell where you are in the Netherlands. Like if you're in the north or the south, or you could be anywhere because all those places kind of look the same. Um, and that's the point. And they're quite ugly. So people live there with a lot of, they live there happily because of all the greenery, which people really love. I mean,
Yeah.
greenery is extremely important. It just misses some beauty. But I still think that the concept of the place works. Although it was built for people who had on average like one car, and now everybody has like two cars or more. So it's one big parking zone where it shouldn't be.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it works.
I
That's the
think I
point.
think one of the things I've kind of thought about that is so unique to architecture is like the lack of, it's like the lifetime of it. So let me think how to word this. Like a film or music or food, you can have trends that come and go very quickly, ultimately because they're disposable art forms in a sense. So if I watch a film, I sit there for 2 hours, I either love it or hate it, and then I fucking forget about it. With
Yeah,
architecture, unfortunately, you build it, it costs a fuckload of money, and then it will sit there for hopefully at least 50 years. But I remember watching your video and you're showing like they don't even
yeah,
sometimes make it to 50. And it's the permanent nature of architecture deviates it from other art forms because you don't have
yeah.
the luxury of trends in such a way that you can with more disposable art forms.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right on. So that's the point with architecture. First of all, it's like you said, it should have some permanence, because we should not be rebuilding this every 50 years, because simply we have a war coming, like we have bigger troubles now than to, oh no, we don't really like this, like, or
Mm,
building something fancy and then breaking down in 30 years. I think having resources in general will be a luxury in some years if we don't watch out.
mm.
So you want to use those resources in the best way possible, that it stands as long as possible and it creates a place that is really useful. Otherwise, you're just wasting resources. And the second thing is that everything you build is public, so everybody has to see it every day. So, if you have like an artwork and it's like a crazy, it's like a, I don't know, like a turd on a piece of paper, you can
That's not
put it
something
in
I'd
a
draw, I think.
Yeah, that's something you could put in a modern art museum, but the city is not an art museum. It's something where people live.
Mm,
So I guess we should perhaps, take other people into consideration and be a bit, gentle with what their city looks like.
yeah.
Instead of like, oh, hey, we have this genius architect who is going to impose his vision on the city, and everybody has to see it for 50 or 100 years,
Mm,
even though it's super ugly. I
yeah.
think that's just it's bad manners.
Yeah, it's very
Um,
disrespectful. Like
yeah,
that's the thing I keep seeing. It just feels to me often disrespectful to the people
yeah,
before you, the history of architecture, the history of the discipline,